It doesn't look like much, but this is the prize for the rest of the world in trying to catch up with China.
We need rare earths.
China owns them, processes them, refines them, and sells them. The entire supply chain is built around Beijing.
No matter what you do, you're always kind of beholden to China.
Rare earths are really the backbone of modern technology.
China's the ballgame. They're 80 to 90% of production and processing of rare earths that go into all equipment around the world.
And China's shown it will use that dominance as geopolitical leverage.
The main use of rare earths are in these powerful, high-performance magnets.
China's capacity for magnets is vast compared to the rest of the world.
When Donald Trump returned to the White House in 2025 and rebooted the US-China trade war, China responded with export controls on rare earths that expose just how much Western manufacturing still depends on China's supply.
The automotive industry came out and not so quietly said, we are going to have to shut down factories if we cannot get these permanent magnets.
That shock set off a broader scramble to build a new supply chain from mine to magnet.
This is a story about not letting one country hold all the chips on what is a very important supply chain.
The US-China trade war has begun.
In case you'd forgotten how influential rare earths are, it was little more than a year ago that they forced a pause in the US-China trade war.
We have a 145% tariff on Chinese goods. Neither one wants to be the one to pick up the phone first.
In April 2025, US President Donald Trump slapped huge tariffs on Chinese imports. Beijing fought back, pulling out its rare earth bazooka.
The automotive CEOs from Detroit were all showing up telling Donald Trump, if you do not get those permanent magnets, which are made from the rare earths, moving back into the United States, we're going to have to start shutting factories.
Beijing had located the weak spot, and at the center of it was a group of metals most people never think about.
Rare earths are a group of 17 metallic elements that are chemically very similar.
They can seem obscure, but the important thing is what they do. They help create powerful, heat-resistant magnets.
They're used in, most of our modern technologies, especially in electric motors. They make our gadgets smaller, lighter, and more powerful.
From phones and wind turbines to electric vehicles and missile systems, rare earth magnets sit inside much of modern technology. And that means the global high-tech economy relies on one country.
China is home to the world's largest rare earth deposit that's been discovered so far. And specifically, it has deposits of heavy rare earths, whereas the US has very, very little.
Heavy rare earths are the most expensive and sought after. They allow high-performance magnets to resist heat and demagnetization.
The real choke point is the processing stage. China controls 90% of the refining process. And then it goes to magnet production, which is the process of making rare earth metals into magnets. And China controls about 90% of that as well.
Mining the ore is only the start. The real work is in the chemistry, separating and refining each element into something magnet makers can use.
The production is so costly and also environmentally very damaging because the processing stage, produces a lot of toxic waste, including radioactive materials. So a lot of Western countries, they're happy to let China take over.
And you can see why. This is Balto in Inner Mongolia, home to China's largest rare earth production site.
Wherever you are in the world, at some level of that supply chain, you are probably reliant on Chinese products.
With China holding such a dominant position, why did it come as such a shock to the Trump administration when they chose to use it?
Really shouldn't have been because China used the exact leverage 15 years ago.
Perhaps because last time it wasn't the US in the crosshairs, it was Japan.
China first used its dominance over rare earths as a geopolitical weapon in 2010 when it restricted exports to Japan because of a territorial dispute.
China said, okay, we are going to restrict the exports of our rare earths that you need, Japan, to turn into the permanent magnets that go into your automotive industry and other industries. This was the first kind of shock to the market.
It lasted only weeks. Even so, it exposed Japan's vulnerability and offered an early warning of how much leverage China had built. To understand how that happened, we have to rewind.
Actually, the US was the biggest player in rare earth all the way from the 1950s to the 1980s. China is a latecomer in the industry, but it caught up really fast.
This was not an accident. Beijing treated rare earths as a strategic industry and built capacity all the way down the chain.
China's late paramount leader Deng Xiaoping has said famously that the Middle East has its oil, but China has its rare earths.
As China scaled up, it became cheaper to buy from there than to make it anywhere else. In the West, thin margins, high labor costs, and dirty processing pushed many operators out.
Consumers were happy with the status quo because they got a steady flow of cheap, reliable supplies of magnets from China for many, many years.
But now the risks of relying so much on China are clear, forcing countries to make their own rare earth plays. This is the largest rare earth processing site outside of China. It's run by the Australian mining company Lynas, which has a $96 million contract to supply heavy rare earths to the US Department of Defense.
Lynas is really the leader in the wave of companies now trying to rebuild the rare earth supply chain outside of China. They started more than a decade ago, took them a long time to start ramping up production.
Lynas aims to produce over 10,000 tons of rare earths oxides per year from this site. But most importantly, it's worked out how to produce heavy rare earths.
We broke the monopoly on separated heavy rare earths last year in May 2025. We are the only producer at scale of both separated lights and separated heavies outside of China.
Rebuilding a supply chain this specialized also means rebuilding skills, experience, and industrial muscle.
Last year in the US, they graduated 35,000 lawyers. They graduated 350 mining engineers.
Meanwhile, China has a dedicated mining and engineering university with 25,000 undergraduate students.
China has invested in developing competence in the rare earths market and getting better and being more efficient every day.
And the urgency for the US has only grown as its war with Iran has depleted the Pentagon's advanced weapon stocks.
We've seen the US burning through its stockpiles of defense systems and weapon systems really quickly, and the US will need to replenish these stockpiles. And to make weapons and defense systems, it requires rare earth.
The US military's exact demand is classified, but a recent report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies estimates during the Iran war, the US has used more than half of its pre-war inventory of some very expensive munitions.
There is definitely a sense of urgency, and it's not just the United States. It is the Western world.
If countries want an alternative to China, they need more than new factories. They also need new deposits. And Brazil is one of the main bets. Latin America's biggest economy is home to roughly a quarter of the world's rare earths, according to the US Geological Survey. This site in southeastern Brazil is run by another Australian developer, Meteoric Resources, that's also receiving backing from the US. The company says there are 1.5 billion tons of rare earth clay in these hills.
Our main objective right now is to put the project in production, to be the next to the world, to produce the mixed rare earth carbonates, and to develop the technology to do the separation. And we can do that differently as China does right now. If you want to be sustainable, you have to buy from a sustainable market.
And the US is also investing at home. Their biggest hope is the Pentagon-backed MP Materials. The Department of Defense bought a $400 million stake in the company in 2025. It expects to be able to separate heavy rare earths later this year. But the problem for every would-be challenger, China's big enough to squeeze margins long before new competitors are secure.
The Western world are intervening and saying that they're willing to put up money to build out these companies, to effectively be a partner that says, we're going to backstop any chance that China takes to flush you out of the market.
China's restrictions on rare earth exports to the US have been relaxing, but its ban on exports for use in US weapons is a red line.
目的是防止稀土非法外流、非法流向大规模杀伤性武器等不当用途。
I think the main lesson we can draw is that building up the supply chain takes time and a lot of efforts. Japan's dependence on China only reduced from 90% in 2010 to about 60 to 70% now. So you can tell that the 15-year process is long and it's slow.
If you're a company that wants 60% from China or 40% from the rest of the world or 50-50, that's a more realizable goal up to 2030 and into the early next decade.
A Bloomberg intelligence report estimates $10 billion of public funds will be invested in rare earth ventures outside of China in 2026. That's a big turnaround.
The monopoly is not going to be broken within the next 5 years. But the US, Australia, Brazil, Japan, South Korea, France will all begin producing some commercial scale of permanent magnets of rare earths. And if you're sitting here 5 years from now and those nations are all producing stuff that actually goes out the door to major buyers, then that's a win.